Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and we make art every week, specifically watercolor. That's what we like to do. So, by the way, this is our new dig. You guys like it? Woo! Thanks, Brock. We got Brock here. We got Keenan on camera. Heidi's hanging out also. We have a party here, and I'm glad that you're joining us for this paint party that's happening on my paper shortly. We are doing this project. The Cardinal, red. It's beautiful. I think red cardinals are male.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
You didn't even have to look that up.
No, I knew that.
Good for you. We have 4 colors that we're using. We have red, dandelion yellow, pine green, and black. And we are using 2 brushes, a round 6 and a round 2. I like to do the round 6 for larger areas and the round 2 for smaller detail areas. Also, my hands are covered in paint because I've been filling paint bottles for your orders, so don't let that distract you too much. Sorry about that. I just, paint. So we have 6 steps for this cardinal. So there are a lot of steps. It might seem overwhelming. You guys are going to be fine. You're going to be great. You just follow along with me. Step 1, we're going to do the belly. Step 2, we're going to put in the shadows on our feathers. Step 3, we're going to do the head. Step 4, we're going to go back and fill in the colors on the feathers. And step 5, we're doing the branch and leaves. And the very last step, we're doing details, which that usually includes like the eyeball or shadows or, depth or that kind of stuff. Are we ready to go? Do I need to say anything else? Oh, we're not ready to go, Keenan. That was a test. You failed.
I fail every
because I'm supposed to say that I know it's really overwhelming. Art supplies. You're like, I want to paint that, but I don't know where to get it. You can get this entire kit at letsmakeart.com for just 15 bucks. Or if you want to do a project with us every week or at least 2 times out of the month, our subscription box is where you want to be at. And that's $35 for 4 projects. So it's a pretty good deal. So you can get all that information on letsmakeart.com. Now we're ready.
Now we're ready.
Now we're ready. Okay, so for the belly of the brush, of the bird, I'm going to start with red and I'm going to use my round 6. Now the thing that you want to keep in mind with this bird is that you want to keep kind of right here on this chest, you want to keep this like a lighter value than the other parts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my round 6 in and then I hit it off the side so I'm not picking up too much water. And I'm going to grab some red. And yes, this red is more of an orangey red, just so you know. It's not a cool red, so it's not like a pink or purple red. It's a warm red, so it has kind of an orange tint to it. That's okay. So I'm going to start by putting in my red here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rinse my brush and use water to spread out that color. And then I'm going to pick up some more red paint, and so when it gets to the bottom part of the bird, it's going back red. Now, there's a pretty strong line here that I kind of want to blend out. That kind of transitions nicely. I want that to do the same thing. So I'm just going to rinse my brush, hit it off the side, hit it off my paper towel, and just kind of blend this a little bit. You might have to do that a couple of times to get a smooth transition. But the reason why we want to create this lighter value in the middle is because we want to show that the body itself is round, that it has a form to it. If we made this all one single value, then it would kind of flatten that roundness that we're trying to create. So we're just going to put that red in there and make sure it's darker. Now the other thing we want to do during this part is I'm going to grab a little bit of the black and I'm going to mix a little bit of my red with it. And then right underneath this wing section that we have here, I'm going to drop that in. And actually I have it kind of outlined because this part is shadowed. So it's like the wing itself, these layers of feathers, is creating a shadow on the body. And so to make it clear that it's a different plane, we're going to put a shadow on there. And already, just by adding that little shadow, it's a little bit more obvious to our viewer that something is on top of this belly. You okay, Brock?
Yeah.
Excuse you. Okay, so that's it for step 1. You guys are doing great. Now we're going to move on to step 2. We're going to do the shadows of our feathers. So I'm going to switch to my round 2 for this, and if you look at your reference photo, or you can look on the computer if you don't have a kit, but if you look at this picture here, we have a lot of shadows going on, and that's because these feathers are layered, and there's actually like different lengths of feathers going on. So these ones up here are kind of shorter, and then when they get here, they're long and layered. And then back here, it's kind of in between, where they're not as long, but they're still layered. We want to put those shadows in first and kind of establish that space, and then we're going to let that dry and move on. So I'm grabbing my 2, and I'm going to use a similar color to what I did for the shadow on the belly, which is just a mixture of red and black. Keenan, have you seen a cardinal in person?
Yeah, there's a lot here in Missouri.
Are they in, is it done by us there in California?
I don't know if that's done or not.
I don't,
I
I don't know either. I think Sue, who paints with us, I think she knows about birds. I feel like she does. Maybe she'll let me know. Somebody's got to know about birds. I don't know. But I did see one when we first moved out here, and they're really beautiful. They're so red. They're so much brighter than you think they would be, especially when it's like, you know, white outside and snowy. Okay, so when I'm putting in my long shadows, I'm kind of following my outline, but remember, the outlines are just guides for you. You don't have to follow them exactly. They're just general ideas, but I'm just making sure I'm putting in some long, skinny shadows here, and then when we get to this part, sorry, I felt like it needed to be darker, so I'm mixing a little black in. I'm just going to kind of follow this.
Sarah has a bit of information for you.
Yes.
This just in.
Yeah.
The northern cardinals, Cardinalis, group of subspecies is resident in southeastern Canada and across most of the United States, which includes southeastern California.
So that would be in California also. Okay,
so.
I've never seen one in person until I moved out to Missouri though. And they are quite beautiful. My husband actually went on this voyage of creating bird feeders around our house because he was determined to have cardinals hanging around. And it worked. We have some. At least I've seen one, so that counts. Okay, so the shadows I'm putting in, again, it's just to establish the shape of what's going to happen. So this is most of what we're going to do for the upper part. Now I'm going to move on to the lower part here. Now for the lower part of the tail feathers, I want to start off with the shadow because there's like a bunch of different, this is a layer, this is a layer, and this is a layer. And these tail feathers are coming out from underneath these feathers, so there is a heavy shadow right here too. So I'm going to create a nice heavy shadow. So I'm going to start off with a black and red mixture that's mostly black. And then there's a couple long, thin, skinny lines, because this is also thin layers of feathers kind of layered on top of each other. So remember, for thin lines, we want really light pressure. You want to not totally plant your wrist. You kind of want to move your whole arm to get longer lines. If it's easier for you to twist your paper, it's easier for me if I kind of go horizontal. So that's what I like to do. And then you can get longer lines that way. Just like that. And then we're going to add some red. I got a lot of black on my brush. Whoa, look at that. So now I'm going to add some red to this. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind when you're doing these layers of feathers, where if you look at our reference, you see there's some thin white lines here and here. We want to keep those because those are kind of acting as a really simple highlight on those feathers. So you want to make sure you have your highlight, you have your medium value, and you have your dark value. We just put our dark value in, we're about to put in our medium and leave some thin white for our highlight. So I'm just going to put some red in, and I actually really just like to do kind of more brush strokes, like just kind of straight, like swoop, swoop, swoop. So my white lines aren't going to be perfectly white, long, all the way through. It's kind of like a hint here and there. And then when we get to the tail, I'm going to get some of that dark back in there. And then just kind of look at the overall. I'm going to add another stroke of red right at the edge here to make that tail seem more a straight line on the edge. There we go. I just want some, I just like pops of color. I just like to drop color in here and there. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So now we're going to move on to step 3. We're almost halfway done with this painting. You guys are doing great. The other thing about animals that you want to keep in mind is they look so funny till the end. Okay, so don't do halfway and then get mad at yourself and then like just stop, because a lot of painting is just sticking with it and trusting yourself to pull it out in the end. If you're not comfortable doing that, then just trust me, okay? I'm telling you, it's gonna be okay. So I'm gonna move on to the head. Now I'm gonna do the red part of the head first, and then I will do the black part. And that's because I want the black part to be very strong and sharp, and I don't want it to blend everywhere, so I'm gonna do the underneath part first, which is this red. I'm just gonna start kind of filling in. Now you can use either your 6 or 2 for this, whatever is easier. It's so quiet.
It is so quiet. The cardinal looks beautiful.
But, Keenan, thank you. Thanks for that.
Don't we need some cardinal facts?
We do need cardinal facts. Why don't you look that up while we do this part? Okay, now when you do the feathers on the top of the head, you kind of want to wisp your brush away because you want it to start thick and go thinner. And so I actually kind of lift my hand up as I'm kind of doing the edge of it. So it's kind of like, and that way you get a nice, narrow, pointy edge. And some texture on there too. Look at that. That looks great. Good job, me. Okay. What? It's okay to like what you're doing, Brock. Okay. So, here's my head. It's looking good. Now, behind the eyeball, it's kind of just shadowed. It's not totally black. We have a red and black mixture in there, so that's what I'm going to grab. My red and black mixture. I'm going to go right behind the eyeball, but I am going to leave a tiny, tiny, tiny thin white line behind the back end of the bird. So when I go to paint in my eyeball itself, I'm going to leave a little thin line because that's just going to accentuate the eyeball a little bit more. And I'm going to blend out this dark color I put in there because we want a smooth transition. So you just kind of work it to where it doesn't seem too chunky. And sometimes you blend out too much that you got to put shadow back in. There we go. Okay. Now, I don't want to do the black part of the face just yet because that red is pretty wet. So I like to just work on a different part instead of having to wait for it to all dry. So I'm going to do the beak. Now when I do my beak, I'm going to grab my red, and there's like a triangle that's outlined at the very top part. That I'm going to leave white for a little bit because we actually want that to be a little bit of a lighter value. So I'm not going to paint that just yet. I'll blend that out to get a lighter red when the time comes. Not yet though, because this is too wet. If I tried to add water right here, it would just bleed out and kind of be a mess. So a lot of watercolor is just kind of, it's like a dance. Like here's a spot, there's a spot, there's a spot. Brock peeked out from around the light when I said that. So that means he probably thought it was weird. But it makes sense to me, okay? And if you're painting, it makes sense to you. So who cares what Brock thinks? Sense. It does make sense, Brock. Out of the corner of my eye, I just see Brock go. Okay. So we're gonna let that dry for a bit. I'm not gonna do the black part. We are going to move on to back into the body of the feathers, and then we'll come back and finish that face. That could be under details. Now we already established our shadows on the wing, and again, keep in mind, we want light in it. So white, thin white lines here on the feathers. Okay, you see how I have those in this area where it's lots of layered feathers. Here it's not as much, it's a little bit, but this is where we really want to pay attention to those highlights. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some red and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of black. And then these top feathers here are going to be this darker red color that kind of transition up to the red. I might have to do some more red because I compromised it. I contaminated it with my black.
That's a word recall.
That was when I could not remember what that word was. And I'm like, Brock, what's that word for ruining something? And you're like, I have no idea. Somebody commented with it. And it is the word contaminate. Let's move on. We're adding red to our bird. And I'm just kind of filling it in. Again, it's kind of a good idea to kind of use these kind of dash brush strokes because then if you do want to leave a highlight, it's easier than just kind of doing this across. Also, whenever you're painting anything, it's a good idea to mimic the brush stroke itself against the form. So we wouldn't go like this to fill it in. These feathers kind of have this swoop shape, so that's what our brush strokes are going to kind of look like. Is they're going to be like woo, 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 woo. So I'm leaving in some highlights here, and it's always a good idea to start off with more highlights, and then you can tone it back down and always add more color. Now, when we get to these back here, they cast a shadow themselves. So there's like 3 big layers. Here's a big layer, here's a big layer, here's a big layer. So when this big layer comes to a point, I want you to just add a little bit of shadow on that and then have that blend out to the red. And that's going to give you more of that look of something is on top of something else. And then I'm going to start connecting to my chest a little bit here. Now remember, you can always do more layers, right? I feel like I lost a little bit of my color in here, so I'm going to go back in and do a little bit of red on top and then put in another shadow layer. That. And then for these areas up here, I'm just going to take like a slightly darker wash and kind of just do little chunks right here. because these are just shorter, smaller feathers on top of these long, thin ones. So we're keeping those a little bit shorter. We're just trying to show that there's a slight difference in texture there. So it's just a hint. It's just a hint of, it's not as smooth. There are layers there, but we don't have to go into crazy detail about what's going on. And then I feel like I lost a little bit of my low lights when I was kind of putting in some red, so you can always put some back in. And it's just the slightest. The nice thing about rounds is you can do really thin lines with your 6 or your 2 or your 10. They all have a nice narrow point. So just make sure you're not carrying so much paint on your brush and you can get a nice fine line. And then this white highlight here, that's a little bit too thick for me. It's a little almost distracting, so I'm just going to do just a little swoop of red over that. There we go. That looks a little more natural. Brock, do you have a cardinal? Keenan, do you have a cardinal fact for me?
I do.
I'm ready.
Okay. Northern cardinals. I chose northern cardinals because they look like our buddy here, and I think we should name him Nordy.
Okay. I get to choose the name, but
okay, true.
I'll I'll take your suggestion.
Thank you. Northern cardinals occasionally go bald, losing all the feathers on their heads and showing black or gray skin instead.
Oh, when do they go bald? Does it say why or when? Just like over time as they get older?
In some cases, mite or parasite infestations can contribute to this temporary baldness.
Oh, sad. But they grow back.
The will eventually regrow.
Oh, great. Okay. Good fact. Thank you, Keenan.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now, when you get to this area back here, you'll see that we have some V shapes going on. You kind of want to keep that shape just a little bit, because that shows that the feather has another side to it. So we're not just going straight across, we want to show that it's going back, and that's kind of showing the fullness of the body and that we're doing both sides of this feather. And it's just a little hint of another, it's like a V on top of a V on top of a V. Okay. Now we're going to move on to our branch. We still have some stuff to finish on our bird, but we kind of want to make sure some things are dry before we go back to it and add all those texture details. So for our branch, I want you to mix together some red and green and yellow, and I'm going to try and get a brown. Let's make some red in there. There we go. And again, complementary colors, you mix them together, they make brown. So red and green, you can add some yellow in there for fun. You can add a little bit. And if this is this is reading too green, right? So then just pick up more red, and that will tone down that greenness. So now I have a nice brown, and I'm going to start off by putting my brown in. And then I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it and red to kind of warm up the brown, because brown is essentially like really dark orange. So if I mix together my red and my yellow to make an orange, you can add a little bit of black to that, that'll make it brown too. And I want the top part of the branch to be a little bit darker, or just like a part of the branch itself needs to be darker than the other side. And that way our branch has a little bit of form. So we want that value change in there. I chose for the top side to be darker. It might make sense for the bottom side to be darker because that's where the shadow is, but it's my world I'm painting, so it's fine. There's a little bit of branch around the feet. I'm going to grab some more yellow. So this was kind of a highlight of orange I did on the bottom, and then I just blended it with the brown that was already there. And I like just pops, strong pops of color places, and I know that when you're painting that might seem really scary because you're like, well, you don't see a pop of orange on a branch or that kind of thing. But it actually will bring interest to your painting. So it might be scary, but just be like, I'm gonna live my life on the edge and I'm gonna put drops of color in these places. That was a good segue into it, right? That made sense. I wasn't saying it just to say it. And then remember, thin lines, light pressure on the point. Continue on with my branch up here. You kind of just want to make sure that your branch is thicker down here, and then as it goes up, it gets thinner. And also we can put a little bit of shadow right underneath this part of the branch because the wing is over it and it would cast a shadow on there. Okay, we have our branch. It looks pretty darn good. Now we're gonna do our leaves. Now remember with leaves, what was that face?
You're doing great.
Oh,
That's just his face.
that's just your face. Sorry, Brock. Sorry about that.
The tutorial.
Okay, now for your leaves, you can get this really cool color right here if you add yellow to it or water. So I know that if you're new to painting, this is what you're gonna wanna do, is you're just gonna like fill it in and have it be kind of even in value. But because we want our paintings to be like interesting and have changes, you can drop in some yellow in there. You can do a nice big one, and you can do some water, which is gonna lighten your leaf. And then you can even just do like a nice little water drop in there. And that's gonna give you some texture and just some interest. And that's my favorite part with watercolor. I like it. I know that some people ask how to like blend out those spots that you get, but I find those the best part about watercolor. So I like to embrace them and I like to create them. So I'm gonna put in my leaf, and then kind of where it's coming out of the branch, I like to drop in some extra color. You can mix green with your black, with your red, with your yellow. They're all gonna give you different kinds of green. I like to drop in some color at the base and just let that spread out, and it's gonna move and it's gonna kind of chunk up, it's gonna do different things, but that's what's gonna make the painting yours. And then I'm gonna drop in just some yellow there. I'm just gonna go and do that on all of my leaves. So just kind of remember to change up the coloring of your leaves, whether it's adding yellow to some of them or even just a change up in value. So having some of them be darker and some of them be lighter, that is gonna make your paintings feel more dimensional. Because the light is hitting all of these leaves differently. There will be shadows on them. There will be interesting things. I'm gonna do some water drops over here. And then another really fun thing that you can do is you can do like a really light wash. So it's basically like paint water that I'm using for this. And then you can drop in some color, and it's just gonna kind of move and do its own thing, and you just let it. And this is a part of watercolor that might be really hard because you're really letting go of control, and you're kind of letting it do the work. But that's what I like about it, because I feel like watercolor does a lot of the work for you. You get these really cool variations by just plopping in some water. It's a lot of fun. So I'm plopping in some yellow right here because I want a warmer leaf. Maybe stronger color back at the bottom. And then this leaf underneath here, I purposely made this one darker because it's kind of underneath the berries. It's kind of coming out from behind the branch. So it's just a little bit darker. And then I'm going to wait a second to fill that one and this one in because I don't want it to bleed with this one that's wet right here. Or you can keep painting and just leave a thin little line in between the leaves, which I didn't do there, but that's okay. There's a little one right there. And the funny thing is you could get really mad at yourself for letting those blend and you can kind of like freak out, but honestly, people can tell those are leaves and that's all that really matters. So don't get mad at yourself for doing something small like that because nobody's going to notice except you. That is my experience, is you're going to make mistakes, but people don't even, they're just so happy you painted something. I'm telling you, people love art. They love it. Brock, don't you love art?
I love art.
Keenan, Heidi, isn't it the greatest?
It is the greatest. Also, if someone doesn't appreciate the time you took into making art, you don't need that in your life.
You don't need that in your life. Truth bombs from Keenan. Okay. So, and of course, this is your painting. You can do whatever you want. Maybe you want crazy more leaves, or maybe you don't like leaves. Maybe it's snowing. Do whatever you want to do to your painting. You don't have to follow me exactly. This is your world that you're making here.
Maybe the Cardinal's wearing an ammo pouch.
Maybe it's wearing a cute little hat. Like a,
Who knows?
oh, like a little fuzzy hat.
Painter's hat.
No, not what I'm saying.
Oh.
Like a beanie, like a snow beanie.
Oh, sure.
Or a Christmas sweater. There's so many great things you can do. I just got really excited. Okay. So that's looking really great. Good job, me. Okay, now I'm going to put in some berries. My little red berries. Now, with berries, really what you kind of want to keep in mind is if you want to give them a little bit extra dimension, then make sure they have a shadow and a highlight. Just make sure they have three values, a dark value, a medium value, and a light value. Now these are pretty small, so it might be hard to get too detailed with them, but usually how I like to do berries is I kind of leave like a white spot when I'm painting them, and then I'll blend that out and that will act as my highlight. So I'm kind of putting in my medium value right now. And if your green is still really wet, it might blend a little bit. If that is going to upset you, then just wait till your leaves are dry. Problem solved. Okay, and then you can put in a little bit of shadow on these berries that you just put in. Just at the bottom or around the edge here. It's just a hint. Okay, and then I'm going to finish off this branch here. I kind of didn't finish it off because I didn't want to run into my leaves. But I feel ready to finish it now. So I'm going to have that go all the way to my leaves there. There we go. And this is my foot. That's why there's this space here. That's the foot of my bird. Great, excellent. Okay, we're gonna let that dry for a minute before I try and finish out those highlights on the berries, and we're gonna move on to the last step. Details. We're here.
That's my favorite step.
It is my favorite step too, because this is the fun part. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the black fur around the bird. So I'm taking just pure black. Now, I'm just getting a good consistency here. You basically, I usually test how my brush feels on the pan before I put it on the paper, and then that tells me how much paint or water I have. So if you're not getting a smooth line or it doesn't feel smooth on the pan, then you might need a little bit more water. If it feels too wet and too smooth, then you just might need a little bit of paint. It just takes a little bit of practice to understand that smoothness, but the palette is a great place to test that before you put it straight to paper. So I'm just going to go in and start putting in my little, tiny little fuzzy. Now when I get to the eyeball, I'm going to leave a nice thin line around it. So these are smaller brush strokes that kind of wisp out at the end to get kind of that like feathery texture. Now I don't want a lot of white space in between these feathers. They're really concentrated. Okay, and now I'm going to turn my painting sideways and just do this little black thin line between the mouth. So I'm going to hold my breath and just do it just a little. You kind of just fill in that white space. Okay, good job, you guys. Good job. Okay, so there's the black part. I don't really want to do my eyeball yet. That is probably something I'm going to do the very last. So I'm going to fix the highlight on my beak here. So you can try and use water just to spread out that color that you already have there, or if it's not spreading very well, you can pick up a little bit of red, but we basically just want it to be lighter in value. So a lighter wash, just like that. I'm going to finish off around the eyeball. I kind of left that bare. That was my phone, sorry. Sorry about that.
That'll disappear.
Okay, so we're going to start doing the feather textures on the bird. So it's just hints of layers and textures. We don't want to go across our entire bird, and this is what you're going to think you should do, because your mind is telling you that there's feathers over this entire thing. So you're like, I have to do feather marks across this entire thing or it's not going to look like a bird. Don't do that. Don't do that, because what that is going to do is it's going to flatten any form that you created on your bird underneath. Because actually what our eye sees is we actually just see hints of the lines themselves. It's how the light is hitting the bird. That's how we can see those things. So also this is more of a loose bird. We're not going in and painting every feather in detail. So if we try to do that now, it would look kind of silly. So to do my little feather textures is I'm just going to try and get a darker red than the red that I have here, but I don't want it black. So it's going to be like a shade or two darker. And you just kind of test it. You just start painting, and if you can't see it, then you just add a little bit of black to it. But basically, I have some on the outline so you guys can follow those, and it's just a little bit like, so it's almost like hash marks a little bit that are connected somehow, and they kind of go in V's. So they kind of go down and then back up a little bit. And I'm going to kind of define this space just a little bit more, these feathers over here. So it's just like, just little hashes like, it's helpful. Keenan, can you make that noise so they're clear on what they need to do?
I'm not sure how to describe that.
The noise? Just do the noise I just did. Yes, yes, thank you. So it's just like, Keenan, thank you for being a good sport about that.
You're welcome.
So it's just like here, here, and there. But just by putting those little layers, just those little bits of texture on this bird, it already is giving our bird a little bit more shape. So, and then I'm going to put a little bit on the chest. You kind of want to make sure it's dry before you plant your hand right in your painting. So remember, it's just kind of here and there, just the softest hint at layers of feathers. Don't go crazy. Don't do it too much all over, because then it would become distracting. And again, flatten your bird a little bit. And maybe just a little bit on the belly. Do a couple on these feathers back here. This one I'm kind of following the shape of them a little bit more instead of just doing random. Here. Oh gosh darn it. It was still wet. That's okay. You move on. I'm going to put my shadows in there again. Let's do another berry there. That. And then I'm just going to kind of use a light red wash to finish off the shapes of these berries. So we're just kind of finishing up the circle. That one got big. I'm gonna mess up one. There we go. This is looking pretty nice. Okay. Now I'm going to do the feet really quick. Now the feet, they're just kind of like a brownish grayish color, and it's just really just a soft little, there's a leg and then the leaf is hiding it, and then there is the other leg. Maybe I'll add a little bit more gray so it has some differentiation between the branch. Is that a word?
Differentiation or
Yeah.
branch?
Differentiation?
Yes.
Is it?
Both of those are words.
Great, great.
With a stretch, maybe.
Is Brock like, no, that's not a word? Ooh, don't worry, someone will tell us if we're wrong.
Every time.
Every time. It's what we can count on you guys for. Okay. What?
That was just a lot of shade.
I didn't mean that as shade. I appreciate when people tell me the right things. I don't get mad. I really don't. I'm not sitting here saying I know everything, and so when you guys tell me the correct thing, I appreciate it. Azure, sepia, sepia.
Camera guy's breathing.
Camera guy's breathing. I have a red face. All the things. Okay. Now when I do the little berry branches, they're just going to be thin little like a, you know, like stems, like little green stems going to the leaf. And that one I wanted to reshape the edge of that. So just kind of throughout where these berries are, you're just gonna, they don't have to connect to anywhere super specific. You might be like, well, where are these branches gathering at? Well, towards the center of where the leaves are is good enough for me. Okay, great. Now the eyeball. Last part, you guys. After we finish this eyeball, we're done. Now this is very wet, so I'm going to try so hard not to put my hand in it, and I'm going to turn my paper to the side. Now on the eyeball, remember to leave a thin white line, and you can kind of see it on your reference photo here. There's a really thin white line around the front and a little bit around the back, and then there's two tiny white little glare dots within that eye. So try and keep that in there. But this is very, you know, precise work, so don't be mad if it messes up. It's not a big deal. It's a piece of paper, you know. So I'm just going to go in. I'm going to kind of outline my eye, and then I'm going to draw around the little dots, and I'm going to start to fill it in. And though that white line is probably a little bit too thick, so I'm going to try and thin it out just a little. Like that. And then I think the white part on the top is maybe a little bit too distracting. So I'm just going to blend that out with some dark red. But I'm going to be careful not to touch my black because I don't want it to bleed everywhere. Okay, I think I just am going to do one more thing. I'm going to add a little shadow. This leg actually isn't touching the bird. It's kind of just floating there. So I'm going to connect that to the body.
Until now, he had a rough day.
Yes. But now he's fine. He's whole again. And a little bit of a darker shadow because the body is casting a shadow on the leg. And just any last second details. I kind of want to darken up the shadow underneath my wing here. Maybe a little bit on the tail feathers. Put some shadows back in. I'm looking. I think I'm good. You guys, we did it. You did the cardinal. Good job. So post it, share it. I want to see it. If you put it on Instagram, you can tag us in it. Let's Go Make Art. Facebook, it's the same thing. And next week, we are doing the Christmas tree truck. Pick up Christmas. It's pretty nice. So that's going to be next week. And that's all I have to say. Yes? Okay. Bye, you guys. Good job. Bye.